Welcome to Deeper with Dani, a podcast where we dig deep because everything is that serious. Happy New Year! I really wanted to film much earlier. I had this projected timeline of launching the podcast early January, but time flew by. And I let my fear get the best of me once again because it feels more terrifying to pursue something creative when you start to take it seriously and not just treat it like a hobby. When I closed off last year, I spent the last 2 weeks of December. I realized that at this point in my life, I kind of need to have creative outlet again, and my blog isn't just cutting it anymore. I kind of want to challenge myself and create something more important. I think that a podcast is the way to go. So the new year is not so new anymore. Even if January is always painstakingly long, it's finally ended. January probably witnessed three types of people that I like to think exist on a continuum. The first type is on the left hand side, those who are completely apathetic at this point, don't view the new year as a new leaf, because maybe apart from just simply not caring anymore, there are people who are just so aware of how terrible the world has become and are just so immersed in all the bad news that you could possibly absorb on social media that changing at the individual level kind of feels useless. So even if I find that to be a tragic perspective, I don't entirely fault these kinds of people, because there was a point in my life where I used to think that too, particularly in the early days of the pandemic, where I felt like my adulthood had been robbed by poor leaders who just did not really care about the welfare of others. In the middle of this spectrum, there are many different kinds of people who may not really believe that a new year is a new chance, or they probably do believe that the new year is a new chance. And there's this desire to change, but the follow through does not exist. Or maybe it does exist. They go to the gym for the first few days, weeks of the year, but then they fall off. The desire to change, to have a good life is there, but the actions don't align with that desire. On the right hand side of this spectrum, there are people who, whether consciously or not, want to change, want a better life for themselves, and are actively taking these steps every single day to be the version of themselves that they like. I like to think that I'm at a point where I swing between person two and person three, where there are things that I've been able to successfully implement in my life just so that things become easier for myself. Liking myself would come more naturally. But at the same time, because I'm not perfect, there are numerous points of improvement that, including this podcast, I set aside, or these are projects that end up falling off despite my desire for it to happen, because of many different reasons: fear, lack of resources, the growing anxiety over whether the world is going to be habitable in the next 20 years. That kind of existential doom. I get that there are many different ways of approaching the new year. I like to keep hopeful about things though. If anything, I like to think that whatever changes I have seen in my life in the last few years and in the first few weeks of this year is that I'm noticing a return to adolescence. It's not regression the way Freud put it. Okay, it's more of all the hobbies that I told myself I wanted to return to, I wanted to be more consistent with in the new year in 2026 are hobbies, interests that my teenage self was dabbling in or wanted me to dabble in. Yeah, everything I do for my teenage self. She had audacity, she had bigger hopes and dreams. If there's anything that these hobbies that I want to be doing or that I am doing have in common, it's that they're more physical now. I'm actively trying not to spend so much time on social media anymore, which I'll get to in a bit. But when I did my year end evaluation, which is how I close off the year, last 2 weeks of December, it's reflection time for me. I list how the year has gone by, what I want to keep doing, what I want to start doing, what I want to stop doing when the new year rolls. I came to the conclusion that I want to be spending more time offline. It's not a shift that I'm noticing on my own at the individual level. I'm also seeing it on my algorithm as well. I'm seeing more people redefine what it means to be a hot girl or a cool girl. And apparently, cool girls now don't have social media presence, are disgustingly educated, and have an analog bag, which is apparently a bag full of physical hobbies that you can engage in over scrolling through your damn phone. This shift to analog, this obsession now with physical media, is signaling us that social status will now be characterized by how much of your life is lived offline, or at least how much you perform offline. I saw a video essay, which I haven't finished, by the way, but it's actually so important because I've only seen the first 5 minutes, but I find that it's such a good summary of what it is that I want to be explaining. It's called Chronically Online People Will Become the New Underclass. That's something, while it's an observed phenomenon that we're seeing on the internet, I think this is the problem that I now have with this so called shift that we're seeing to analog. Because it's not just being disgustingly educated, it's having hobbies that may or may not be your cup of tea, but there are people who might feel pressured to engage in the very same hobbies because everyone else is doing it, like going to Pilates, jogging every day, curating your junk journals. On one hand, the reason this is happening is that many of us are coming to terms with how polluted social media has become. It's not a fun place anymore. I find that people are so nostalgic for the boxy computers that we used to have in the early 2000s. That nostalgia exists because that was probably the last time that social media or the internet in general was fun. Now it's no longer fun. You have information overload, you get rage baited all the time. Being online drains the life out of you. This shift to going analog is reasonable because people are speculating or theorizing that this might just be our way out of the brain rot, which is funny because I don't think people are using the term brain rot in jest anymore, which is its roots. People used to use the term brain rot jokingly. TikTok brain rot, social media brain rot, and it was the word of the year at some point, 2023 or 2024, I'm not sure. But now, I think a lot of us are noticing just how bad the brain rot is because maybe your attention spans are shorter. You are incapable of forming an original thought. You just parrot everything else that everybody promotes through your algorithm. And there's a loss of identity that I think is now pushing us to the complete opposite of being chronically online, and that is going offline, living a life that is disconnected from this third space that is social media. And while I empathize and support this resistance against technology by trying to downplay its significance or trying not to give it as much power as it currently does, I can't help but notice how we still run the risk of repackaging the underlying problems in our modern world that are reducing our humanity and turning us into a husk of a person. So, to put it simply, I'm afraid that many of us are just mindlessly jumping in on another fad, despite the merits of said fad. I'm afraid that many of us are going analog just to perform for another kind of audience, for an audience that probably also doesn't care. So, my first question today is, how much of this decision to go analog is yours? This was in the back of my mind when I did my year-end review, when I started listing down habits that I wanted to start doing, continue doing, and stop doing. I realized that, yeah, I do want to spend less time on social media. And it was something that I was actively doing throughout 2025. I really wanted my screen time to be below 6 hours. At the height of the pandemic, my screen time was at a whopping 13 hours. That's more than half of my day. That's most of my waking hours. And as Viktor Frankl put it, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. So for a very long time, I justified this use. It was difficult to get out of, difficult to critique, because social media had always been a part of my life, especially since my formative years. I grew up on the internet unsupervised. I socialized with people there, and that was mostly because I had very strict parents who did not allow me to engage in hobbies or partake in social activities offline. And so it came naturally to me to continue to depend on social media because that was my third space. That was the most accessible third space for me, which I think contributes to why I think I cannot completely quit social media, but instead adopt a harm reduction approach to it because it's come to a point where everyone recognizes that your social media presence is not separate from who you are offline. If anything, it's an extension of yourself. It also represents who you are. That's why I'm not fully supportive of just going cold turkey, eliminating all of your digital footprint, and just living your life offline as if you were from 2001. But I respect those who are capable of doing that. I wish I had that kind of courage and privilege even to be doing that. But with the question that I posed, how much of this decision to go analog is yours? I want us to be more mindful when we see this cultural shift happening. Yes, it's good to want to go back to physical media, especially in the age of AI slop, where the information that you see on the internet is no longer reliable, that you have to return to physical things to help you determine which is true, which is not, how to do certain things, how not to do certain things. I understand the need to go analog again. I support it even. I encourage people to re examine their relationship with the internet and figure out how to do better so that you don't end up being so passive and so disconnected from who you are. Because it's scary. It's scary to see how, because of the convenience of social media, we're more outcome obsessed than process oriented. People are growing impatient. People are easily angered. People don't see through the end of things anymore because social media has engineered our brains to seek instant gratification. And I find that we miss out on so many things, on the beauty of getting to know ourselves when we choose convenience over a little discomfort that comes with immersing yourself in the process of getting to a certain place. And I think that explains why the analog hype makes so much sense because it's slow, because not many tabs are open. When you read a physical book, it's a physical book. When you listen to music on an iPod Nano, you're only listening to music. There are no ads. There are no sponsors distracting you from that experience. So it's understandable. It's understandable why people want to go to analog now. But another gripe that I have with this is that because there's still this element of performance, actually, we can't really get rid of our need to perform because as social beings, we're always performing. We're always assigned to certain roles that we need to enact well just so that we feel validated or accepted by the communities that we're part of. But I digress. I digress. It's a performance, but I'm so scared that people might lose the wonders of touching grass if they simply see this as another kind of unique thing to make content out of. I'm not the best person to be preaching about this, especially that I am literally a content creator. So the jokes write themselves, right? But even I am trying to be more mindful about the things that I promote. I don't want to end up being a capitalist slave, even if to a certain degree in my day job, I am kind of that. But I don't want that to bleed into the hobbies that I consider to be leisure, reading, watching movies, killing time. I hope that when we switch to analog, when we go back to physical media, when we bring back the slowness that comes with engaging with physical media, I hope we're not doing it because, oh, everybody else is doing it. Oh, because this is in. I hope that we're doing it because we find fulfillment or happiness or pleasure in doing it. We have now become so allergic to being bored that it is destroying our brains. This is not scientifically backed, by the way. This grievance that I'm sharing here is mostly based on experience and my personal observations as someone engaging on social media. I think that the desire to fill in other parts of our days with hobbies to engage in come from this allergy towards boredom. When was the last time you daydreamed? When was the last time you went out in public, took public transport, and people watched? When was the last time you let your thoughts wander? I don't remember. I've started worrying about this because I've started reading books again. Like, I've just finished my first book. I'm currently reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley for the first time, and I caught myself unable to properly conjure an image of what I was reading, and that terrified me. Like, I'm returning to slower media, but I also feel like social media has done a number on my imagination, and that scared me. That was so scary. But luckily, the human brain is fascinating because it just takes a little practice for you to remember skills that have gone dormant. I like to think that the way that I am sustaining habits that don't involve social media are now pushing me to really make sure I don't spend any more than 4 hours on my phone so that I can still be or feel like a person, so that I can actually feel smart. I think the wonders of going analog, that you get to exercise your decision making again. You get to experience having to choose. Like, it's not prepared for you by the algorithm anymore. You have to seek it out. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about it. Like, as I said earlier, we have to be more process oriented than outcome obsessed. Instead of wanting something, wanting to be a cool, smart girl who reads books, goes to Pilates because it's the hottest thing right now. I think we just have to allow ourselves to experience not completely knowing what we'd like to consume, what we'd like to create, and allow ourselves to feel bored, to wander, to not let our little gadgets decide for us. I think that's how we can reclaim our power back. That's how we can remember that we are persons, not determined by what big internet wants us to be. I guess my last point here is, if we want to go analog, which, I'm not completely against it. I hope that we're doing it in a sustainable way. When I listed the hobbies that I want to be doing once again in my free time, I wanted to be doing so many different things. And some of these things required purchasing new things, or at least it activated this desire that, oh, I need to have the latest equipment to start filming a podcast, or, oh, I need the latest gadget so that I could be accessing these kinds of things. While I am not prohibiting anyone from using their resources to purchase things that could make their lives easier, I hope we don't make it a habit where we constantly feel like we have to be buying new things just so that we can participate in a certain hobby. And I think this is a special grievance or sentiment that I have about junk journaling. Some of you aren't junk journaling girlies at all. Some of you just like to be seen as junk journal girlies. And not to be the junk journal cop here, but I think that's also the performative aspect that I'm seeing on social media, where people are purchasing punchers, special punchers for their junk journals. They're purchasing stickers just so that their junk journal looks good, which kind of defeats the purpose of junk journaling altogether. Again, are you really doing it for the process of it, or are you just obsessed with the outcome? So let's rethink our decisions. And I know some people will say, oh, but this is my life, I'll do what I want, blah, blah, blah. But again, is it sustainable to be doing that? I know it may just be a few little purchases, not so big purchases, but I think that with how we perform sometimes online, we lose sight of what it truly means to engage in these hobbies. When we engage in certain hobbies, we have to make sure that it fits our lifestyle, that we're not trying to include this in our lives because we want to be seen doing it, but because we think that this could actually help us live a life that we're proud of. I think ultimately that's what we all want. A version of ourselves that we're comfortable with, that we actually like and are proud of. And I think it may just require changing just a few habits. We don't have to copy everything we see on Pinterest. We don't have to be exactly like the people we see on our feeds. This all the more supports my notion of needing to spend more time offline, because we need to detach ourselves from this whole world on social media so that we can hear our voices better. It's good that people are now putting intellectualism on a pedestal, that there's a demand to want to be smart, to want to reclaim our attention span in this economy where attention is such a powerful thing. I guess we just have to be more intentional, more mindful about it, and truly ask ourselves how much of this decision is ours. If it's motivated by what our algorithm is telling us, how can we reclaim this decision and make it our own? For me personally, that means going back to reading, going back to writing, honing my speaking skills. It doesn't always have to be what social media dictates to be the cool girl. I can create my idea of the cool girl. I just have to enjoy the process of it, which I think is the solution to being more consistent with the podcast as well, which is like another recent realization. So yeah, analog hobbies are in, but we have to be more mindful about it and constantly ask ourselves, how can I make this mine? How can I make sure that this is enjoyable for me? And how can I make sure that I'm not just letting my algorithm feed me things that I feel like I have to be doing? I guess that's all I want to say. If you enjoyed the pod, be sure to share, follow, rate us 5 stars. I love how I say us as if I'm not a one-woman team, but I am a one-woman team. It's me and my different personalities as a Gemini moon and rising. But yeah, good to be back. I hope to catch you all next week, hopefully. Now that I've overcome the filming part, it's the editing part that's gonna be a bitch. So wish me luck. If you want to collaborate with me, invite me to your event, you can email me at heyjustdani@gmail.com. If you have podcast related concerns, suggestions, messages, you can message below on if you're listening to this on Spotify, or you can hit me an email at dearjustdani@gmail.com. Be sure to follow the pod on Instagram as well at Deeper with Dani. Follow me on Instagram, my personal Instagram if you're interested, at Not Just Dani. And thanks for being here. I'll catch you on the next episode. I'll see you soon.